Happy Sunday, Jeffrey Chicoine. Yes.
Hello.
How are you?
You know what? I'm doing okay. The sun is shining, That's what
Listen,
I asked for.
listen. Don't we need it? Don't we need it?
Honestly, yeah.
'Cause you know what? I know that I don't want to complain about winters because we live in Michigan and obviously we're going to have winters, but damn it, I'm tired.
Yeah,
And
I don't even mind it. As long
right.
as the sun is shining, even if it's cold, I tell you what, every day this week, lunchtime has been, let's just go sit in the park for a few minutes and get some fresh air because it's been too long.
It has been. And the sun does make everything a lot better because even if it's bitter cold and the sun is out, you do feel a little bit better having the sun on you. I know that's how I feel.
Yeah, same.
All right.
It,
So
you feel like a brand new person. It's true.
oh, come on. And don't I need to feel like a brand new person? I do. Okay, hold on. Let me throw up these banners because I always forget. Guess what, everybody? We're talking to my friend Jeffrey Chicoine. Woo woo. And we're talking about something very important today. You and I, and whoever else is watching. Thank you all who are watching today. Why don't you do me a favor? Let me know where you're watching from. If you have any questions or comments, you know to go ahead and drop them in the box where comments are, and I will come back to them. So we're talking about the use of pronouns today. So first, I just want to kind of let everybody know how you and I know each other. Because a lot of times when I do my LinkedIn lives, I'm talking to people who I know through LinkedIn, who I met through LinkedIn, but that is not the case for you and I, Jeffrey Chicoine.
No.
No. So Jeffrey and I met in 2014 while I was interning for the Wyandotte Democratic Club. And for those of you who don't know, the Wyandotte Democratic Club is in Wayne County, Michigan. We're a small city. And Jeffrey, you were doing some work, and you were involved. And at one time you ran for office. I hope you will do so again one day, but that's a different conversation for another day. And so we just became friends and we've been friends ever since. So I asked you on today to talk specifically about pronouns because for a long time, I resisted using them. I will be using them moving forward. So people who follow me on LinkedIn will all of a sudden see that my name says Ayana King, she, her, hers, and there's a reason for that. So first, I want to tell them why this whole conversation came up and why you and I were talking about it. And the reason is because recently I was working with clients and that community, they have a lot of folks from the LGBT community who are working for this specific organization who I'm working with. And in doing a workshop around gender, I just like totally left out folks from the non-binary community, people who are non-gender conforming, and people who are intersex. And I'm so grateful that I work with people who, they feel comfortable talking to me and I feel comfortable sharing things with them. And so they just plainly said, well, these people feel left out from the workshop. And man, it was a punch in my face and it was a punch in my gut. And it was a time for humility. And I felt so grateful that they said that because it really did change the way that I'm doing my workshops when I talk about gender. So let's start out before we really get into why I wasn't using pronouns. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then I want you to talk a little bit about what I mean when I talk about non-gender conforming community and intersex community. Is that okay with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So my name is Jeffrey Chicoine. Like Ayana said, we sort of met doing political work, and during that sort of time, I was running for office myself. Currently, I do government relations. I do government and community relations for Beaumont Health, which is the largest healthcare provider. And one of the benefits of doing that kind of work is that I really stay connected to the community and help sort of address the sort of like the softer non-clinical issues that crop up in that sort of an environment. I think that this is a topic that's really important. I use pronouns as well, but I think that it is an important. My pronouns, by the way, are he, him, and I think it's an important topic to talk about because there's can be a lot of confusion around why and the what's. fortunately, you know, Ayana always says something in her talks, and it's something that I always want to repeat, which is like, I am only an expert in being me, right? I am a cisgendered male, and that is just my experience. Fortunately, my lived experience as a member of the LGBTQ community is that I have a lot of people in my life who are non-binary or non-gender conforming or transgender, people who have different experiences with pronouns that have become sort of, you know, part of my lived experience and my sort of reservoir of knowledge too. And and I've spoken with a lot of those folks actually sort of before this conversation, just to make sure that I'm sort of accurately representing those experiences as well. But I by no means know everything, and I just want to be clear about that moving forward. But I really appreciate taking the opportunity to talk about something that I think people might be a little nervous about asking questions about.
Oh, definitely. So what I would like to start out with is, already you have probably used some language that people do not know, do not understand, and may not ask what it means. So can you tell us what you mean by cisgender?
Mm-hmm. So cisgendered, very simply, is your gender identity matches the gender that you were assigned at birth. As we sort of all know, you are assigned a particular gender at birth corresponding to whatever genitals you're born with. So your sex is sort of merged with your gender at birth. If you are a cisgender person, then your gender identity matches that designation. If you're a transgender person, then it does not, very simply. But I also want to sort of make it clear that it's just not one or the other, right? There are folks who, their identity doesn't match either of those two things. There are people who frankly, their sex doesn't match one of those two things. So this idea that like, oh, your biological sex, that's really not a precise designation either. So when I say cisgender, I'm simply talking about people whose gender identity matches the sex that they were assigned at birth.
Yes. So which brings me back to why we were originally talking. Because when I had my workshop and I talked about gender, I talked about male and female. And so there were people who really consider themselves non-gender conforming or non-binary, meaning they may identify with both genders or they may not identify with either. And so I think that's very important for people to understand, which then morphed into a conversation around pronouns. Okay. So this is what I would say for me. For a long time, I did not want to use pronouns, and this is why. So I network a lot on LinkedIn. That's where almost all of my followers are from. It's where probably 80% of my business comes from. It's from LinkedIn. It's one of my favorite platforms to use. And I don't know, maybe 3 years ago now, I all of a sudden started seeing an explosion of people using pronouns behind their name. But because I would follow some of these people, or maybe they were a second degree connection, and I would see their feed and see their content in my feed, I knew better. I knew better. And it didn't feel good to me that people seem to be using pronouns as a way to say, this is who I am, this is my gender, and screw everybody else who says they are transgender, or, they use they, them, or however it was. And you know what? For me to start using pronouns, especially at that time, felt very trendy, felt like I would have been hopping on the bandwagon. And that's just not who I am. If I do something, I do it for the right reason, not because it's the right reason right now. And so I just did not feel good about it, and I did not want to use them. But after really this workshop that I was in with clients who really did do a very fantastic job of telling me, listen, this is who you're leaving out and it's not okay. And I'm noticing, a lot of people on their team using pronouns. I started doing some research. I started going to YouTube. I started going to TikTok, and I started really listening to people from the LGBT community about the use of pronouns. And what I came away with was The reason that it's important for people who are not in the LGBTQ community to also use pronouns is because we should normalize it for everyone. And I think you'll talk a little bit about that. But also, someone told me specifically that it helps them to identify who is safe. Now, just like I know, not everybody using pronouns is safe. Um, but it does give someone, I think, a level of comfort to see the pronouns first, and then they can follow up to see what that person is doing and saying, and do their actions match what they would consider genuine allyship. And so that changed it for me because I do want to be, and I want to be a better advocate to those in the LGBTQ community. And so I will be using pronouns from now on. But I really wanted to come on and make sure that we had a conversation about why, especially those folks who consider themselves allies, should also be using pronouns.
I think my response to this would be sort of like two-pronged, right? So I kind of would like to break it down and sort of talking about like the trendiness issue and why it's still important, even though people may feel like it's sort of a bandwagon social media construct, right?
Yeah.
Wagon rather. But at first, I sort of would like to rewind the tape a little bit and just talk about like why pronouns are important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like why are we having this whole conversation? Why does somebody feel the need to like put that in there? Because like you at first, I was sort of slow to pronoun use as well. And my attitude at the time was, well, I'm not really an ambiguous person. I feel like people know, who I am and what I am, or, they spend a very sort of small amount of time talking to me and they're able to sort of figure that out for themselves. But if you rewind the tape a little bit, it was a point that sort of you made, right? And that is, it is changing the narrative of what is considered sort of a normal pattern of interaction, right? And why is it important to do that, right? I think anybody that you talk to will like tell you that names are important. Your given name is important to you. It's how you identify your personhood. And if you just look linguistically, a pronoun is used to stand in for that proper noun. So your pronoun is used to identify your personhood, just in a quicker, more casual way, right? And by using incorrect pronouns, deliberately or otherwise, you are denying that personhood of the person that you're talking to, right? It would be the same as if, let's say you or I had a job. Let's say I went to work and my boss just called me Jim every single day, right? Never learned my name, never got it right. Just, oh, Jim, go do this. I'd feel a certain sort of way about that, the same way that you'd feel if somebody was calling you Alyssa every day, right?
Or Alicia, which was not my name, which I was called. The only other Black person that worked in an office where I worked for like several months. And I was like, that's not my name. That's
exactly.
Not my name.
Exactly. And you do, it's sort of an erasure sort of feeling, right? Like, okay, I'm not important. I'm not worth, anything here. And that's essentially what's happening here. If somebody denies sort of the pronoun from somebody, that is what is happening. It's an erasure thing. And essentially what you're doing is if you think about the context of a transgender person, right? Somebody who has, claimed their own name, claimed their own identity, and really had to fight for it. In the same way that calling a transgender person by maybe the name that they were born with, it's a phrase that is called dead naming, right? If you're deliberately or even not deliberately using incorrect pronouns to refer to this person, you're dead naming them, which is an incredible, frankly, a violent thing to do because it's a deliberate sort of erasure, bullying behavior.
Yes.
So I think that people need to like connect that in your mind, and if you're a person who has to think about like the rule is a pronoun stands in for a name.
Yes.
You wouldn't call somebody by a different name.
That's right. So I like that you said that it's violent. It is violence. And to drive that point home, I watched a YouTube video of a transgender woman who was really explaining pronouns. And she was saying how her family refused to call her by the name that she had chosen for herself, that she had gone by for many years. And she ended up like disconnecting from her family because of it. But what she said was that every time they called her by another name, it felt like a punch in the gut. And it felt deliberate and it was hurtful. And so I think the same thing about pronouns. When someone says their pronoun is they, that's what it is. It's not for you to question, unless you are in my opinion, and I'm open to discussing this too, but unless you have a close relationship with this person and you are coming from a place of love and wanting to understand and to know, and you have, again, a relationship where you can have this kind of conversation, if they say it's they, them, that's what it is. That's what it is. That's what it is. That's what it is in the workplace. That's what it is, at the family picnic. That's what it is in the grocery store. That's what it is. And to refuse someone the courtesy and the respect of using that pronoun is violence, plain and simple.
It's not different in my view. It's not different from something that I experience all the time, which is sort of the Jeffrey dynamic, right?
Yes.
So I typically will introduce myself as Jeffrey. That is my name. That's what I'm comfortable with. And while I'm not bothered if people call me Jeff, and in some cases I will refer to myself as Jeff. I mean, when I ran for office, I called myself Jeff to everybody because I thought it was quicker and easier. And,
Yeah.
it doesn't bother me. But when I introduce myself and somebody says, oh, do you, like, the normal response is, do you prefer Jeff or Jeffrey? And I say, I usually go by Jeffrey, but either is fine.
Yeah.
I'm bothered by that exchange, right?
Right.
And that's the same thing. Somebody asking me how I prefer to be referred to, or not even prefer, but like, what is my name?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm telling them. And it's the same kind of conversation here. And I think that people get too awkward about something that doesn't need to be awkward.
Mm.
And I think that oftentimes, if you just like chill for a second, you'll know what the correct thing to say is.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that too. I want to talk about preferred pronouns. I want to talk about, do you ask someone their pronouns? But before I do that, because I know that you work in healthcare, I want, if you can, if you're comfortable with this, I want you to help those watching understand why it is especially important in healthcare that we respect people's pronouns, not their preferred pronouns, their pronouns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is really true for every sort of industry, but I'll talk to healthcare since that's what I do. The unfortunate truth is every transgender person I know, I don't know if it's every non-binary person I know, but certainly every transgender person I know has some kind of horror story from one healthcare system or another. Doctors, nurses repeatedly referring to them with incorrect pronouns, repeatedly referring to them, by something other than their name, just because of something that was maybe like in their chart or, I've even heard stories, fortunately not from my healthcare system, but I've even heard stories extreme to the extent of like denial of care. Like, oh, why do you need this kind of test if you're this gender? And it really is, I mean, it really does come down to quite a dire sort of life-death situation, right?
Yeah.
And also, when you go to the hospital or if you go anywhere in a healthcare setting, you're vulnerable, right? You feel vulnerable. That's just a normal sort of human reaction to being sick, right? Like,
Right.
we don't like being confronted with our own mortality, generally speaking. Like, that's just not a thing we like as humans. So we're feeling particularly vulnerable. And what you need in a healthcare setting, or what you need from, say, law enforcement, or we could go down the list of other people that you're interacting with. you need a sense of security that they're going to take you seriously, that they're going to take care of you, because that's what you expect when you're interacting with them.
And that they're going to respect you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it can be quite stark. I mean, I know Beaumont. I can't speak to other healthcare systems, but I know Beaumont has done quite a bit of work over the last few years of making sure that physicians and nurses, not even just everybody that sort of works with Beaumont, has the opportunity to sort of talk about these things and say, okay, what are your issues? How can we correct? Because like this can't happen, right? Like I don't want to say keep happening, but like this isn't a thing that can happen. We know that it happens in a healthcare setting, not for every healthcare system. How does that get corrected? And fortunately, I think doctors and nurses, they have to treat every kind of person there is, right?
Right.
I think fortunately, they've been able to sort of learn and okay, this is the correct way to go. But like everybody else, I think the thing that we hear most from folks is, well, it's awkward. I don't do I go in? Do I ask? How do I talk about this? Well, I read the chart and saw that they were assigned a certain gender, and I referred to them as such, and they reacted very poorly because that's not their gender, and I don't know how to recover from that, right? Yeah. How do I move the conversation forward? I just avoid it? Do I just... And so, those are the same kind of conversations that I think everyday people have.
Yes. So if I could just interject really quick about, I think I explained this to you too, that this is after all of the work that I just started doing, right? And just like I know, the work always continues. Listen, if you think you're going to come to a workshop, if you think you're going to hire a consultant and you're going to get it right, and in 12 months you're done, you're kidding yourself, because this work continues on and on and on, because we have to continue to learn. That's the first thing I say to people when I'm working with them. So as I'm learning all of this, of course, in my body, in my mind, in the kind of work I do, I know that you will make mistakes, but it can be very, it's embarrassing, not just for the other person, for you too, if you're a person with compassion and you're a person who's empathetic. And so after all of this stuff that I was sort of learning, because, through the result of this client I was working with, I went to one of my favorite little craft stores. People who know me personally know that I am an avid crafter. And there were two people at the checkout who were ringing me up. And on my way out, I said, "Bye, ladies." And instantly I was like, oh, I knew that I had made a mistake in saying that, because I knew with my eyes, okay, that maybe that was inappropriate for me to assume, that both people wanted to be called lady, that either one of them wanted to be called ladies. And so instead of me like pretending that I didn't say it, and what I did was I just turned around, I made eye contact with that person, I put my hand over my heart, and I just bowed my head to let this person know, to let them know that I was sorry, that I'm learning. And that's what we have to do. We have to be willing to be wrong, to really operate in humility and really learn a new way. And so one of the things that I learned and now I'm relearning, is that at first, when I was sort of doing my research, and talking to people too, oh, ask pronouns. And it just felt awkward. Like you said, it just, it would feel even awkward for me to introduce myself and then give my pronouns right afterward. It just seems unnatural for me to do that, just in the way that I talk. So I love that you said, if you just start listening to somebody, you don't have to ask their pronouns, because they will let you know who they are. And then the second thing is that in doing some of this research, another transgender woman on YouTube said, do not ask people their pronouns, especially when you are in a large group, because they may be uncomfortable, because honestly, sometimes people have to rethink. You don't know where they are in their journey. And to ask them on the spot, any hesitation that they give may out them. And I do not ever want to do that. I don't ever want to put someone in that position. So I love that you said you don't necessarily have to ask anyone's pronouns. If you listen to them, they will let you know who they are.
And it's interesting to your first point, sort of surrounding the awkwardness. I was not surprised because this has just been my experience. But yeah, every person that I talked to about this topic, every trans person that I talked to about this topic said, like, look, mistakes happen,
Yeah.
right? You might get it wrong
Yeah.
because you're not doing it on purpose. I don't care. You
Yeah.
know, I'll get over it. If you keep doing it, then yeah, we're going to have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody makes mistakes. And to me, that made a lot of sense, right? Because when I was young, this may shock you, I used to have very long hair. Um, and, I think anybody, especially like, guys, I was also much skinnier. So like skinny guys with long hair, they, if somebody sees you at work or whatever, they might sort of, misgender you and be like, oh, ma'am, can you grab this for me or whatever? That has certainly happened to me. And like, while it is momentarily awkward, like you just move on from it. Like
Yeah.
when you realize that you're wrong, you go, oh, sorry. And then you correct it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really just the thing. As long as you correct it when you're wrong, nobody's going to be that mad at you.
Right. And as long as, like you said, you don't make it a habit of being habitually wrong, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then, just being huffy about it when somebody tells you that you're wrong. I'm telling you, when my clients said what they said to me, which is there are people in this workshop who feel left out because when you talked about gender, you left them out. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't get huffed up and, well, this is my workshop and this is how I do it. No, I'm telling you, I felt ashamed. I felt sad that I had done that because in my mind, I thought, you know what, these people signed up for a workshop months ago. Were excited about the workshop because they felt like they had someone in their corner. And
Mhm.
then for us to kick off the workshop the way we did and for them to not feel a part of it, I felt bad. I felt really bad. And it prompted me to do my work. Damn it, do your work. Okay, people, do your work. We've got work to do. If we want to be better advocates, we have to learn a different way.
And I
That's it.
think everybody's going to make a mistake. I mean, especially in the Western world, we're very much conditioned with this idea of a binary. We don't have a whole lot of space for somebody who is not one or the other, right?
Right.
But the reality is, and I don't just mean the reality of human psychology. I mean the reality of human biology.
Hmm.
Is just not true. You're not one thing or the other. Um, many cultures sort of historically and currently understand this. Many cultures have space for people who don't conform to sort of the gender binary, which is just male female. We don't have a whole lot of space for that in American culture or sort of Western culture generally. And
Right.
as such, I think that like as people living in this culture, we do have to create that space for mistakes, right? Because we're conditioned a certain sort of way.
Right. But conditioned a certain way does not mean you have to stay that way. So I also love that. So I'm going to put up a question right now for those of you watching. Do you use pronouns? Just answer me yes or no. Maybe I'll call on you if you have a comment that extends out. But Jeffrey, can you talk for a second about preferred pronouns?
Yeah. Yeah, so I know for a while I think this sort of caught on in like corporate culture, like the corporate answer to like the pronoun. I don't know if you want to call it a debate, we'll call it a conversation. But
Okay.
sort of like the corporate answer to like, oh, what would you prefer to be called?
Hmm.
I don't think that came from like a bad place. Um,
Hmm.
but it is important to acknowledge that like a preferred pronoun is something that you use when you have more than one, right? Like I prefer to be called Jeffrey, but it's okay if you call me Jeff, right? If someone has more than one pronoun, say, okay, I go by he, him, but I also go by they, them. And if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I prefer to use they, them, just because I don't know that person very well. I do the same thing, right? I go by Jeffrey because that is my like formal name. Like, don't call me Jeff, you don't know me like that. I'm being silly, but that's what it is, right?
That's real, right?
And so, there is a good like space for preferred pronouns, but I would caution us from using this in the sense that like, oh, like that's your preferred pronoun, because especially in the case of a transgender person, it's not their preferred pronoun. That's their pronoun.
Period.
Like,
Full
that
stop.
is who they are.
Right.
And so I want to, it's not a preference, right? And I think about this, and I want to be clear, this conversation around pronouns, this is not like a queer issue. It's an issue that exists very prevalently in the queer community for LGBTQ people. But some people who have different pronouns are straight people, right? And so I think it's important to understand that like this is not a queer issue, although it does exist significantly in the queer community. So
Right.
it's and much like many of the other issues that exist in the queer community, these things are not a choice, right? It is sort of an intrinsic part of who we are, and we are telling you like how we are expressing that, right?
Yes.
I did not choose to be a gay man. I simply am, right? I did not choose to be a man. I did not choose to be male. It is just who I am. And it just so happens that the gender I was assigned at birth corresponds with the gender that I am.
Hence cisgender.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate this conversation so much, and I know that other people do too. So use your pronouns. It's okay. It's okay for straight people to use pronouns. It's not, just for the LGBTQ community, because if it was, like that's just crazy. It is for everyone. I want to say that first. And then the other thing I want to say too is when we talk about preference, I just think it's an appropriate time to also bring up sexual preference can also be very offensive. Okay. It's orientation, folks. So I'm just going to put up a couple comments here. I have a few of them. Hi, Deborah Elliott. Deborah says, I too have hesitated using pronouns because it felt trendy and insincere. Yes, that's how I felt too. However, if using pronouns in my social media profiles and email signatures will help to make others feel safer, I am on it. Deborah, that's why we get down, girl. Yes.
Yeah, Deborah, I agree.
And for that reason, I love you, girl. Mm-hmm.
My experience is actually like I have a similar sort of mindset from a different set of experiences, right? Because what I've seen as a member of the LGBTQ community, I've seen a lot of cisgendered white men sort of claiming a different pronoun, which to me came from a place that was very insincere, came from a place of wanting to stand out, right? But the reality is like it's like I can't make that judgment, right? Like I don't know them. I don't live in their head. I can't make that judgment, but I absolutely understand what you're talking about because I've had that same sort of experience. And I think a lot of people, especially because we're in this age of like social media, it's responding with like an interesting thing, which is I think that younger people, it seems like gender and sexuality are sort of trendy among younger people. But if you think about it, when you're a teenager, like that is the time period where you are really forming your identity generally, right? Mm-hmm. And as a result, I think we all wanted to, I think we sort of fall into one of two categories, right? We were either the kind of person that wanted to stand out or we were the kind of person who wanted to sort of blend in, right? Or somewhere in between. And I think that, sometimes people can sort of be front and center with their identity in a way that can be off-putting because they're still navigating it themselves, right? And I don't think that that means like, oh, they're just following the internet trends. No, it's just that because we have the internet, because we're more connected to each other globally than we ever have been before, our understanding of identity is different. And so people may be looking at different sort of facets and being like, okay, well, I feel like this. I feel like this. And you will see some in some cases later on, folks will sort of drop that and say, you know what, I used to use these pronouns, but this is now what I'm more comfortable using. And I know that people say, well, see, it wasn't real, but that doesn't mean it wasn't real. Just
Right.
they reevaluated. I like to think that there are certain parts of me that I've reevaluated over, the years since I was a teenager. But some things are intrinsic. Right?
Yeah.
I'm no less gay than I was then, right? Like, so I get the sort of understanding or the impression that like this is just a trendy thing. Like kids these days, they're pan, they're bi, it's whatever. But that space needs to be created, right? We all went through that to some extent, right? Maybe it wasn't your sexuality or your gender expression that you really struggled with, but everybody had some part of their identity that they had to figure out, right?
Hmm.
To work through. That's just a normal part of the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and you talk about how like maybe some of this will change. And that's okay too. It doesn't mean people are insincere. And that just really reminded me of a podcast I just listened to the other day, and the name escapes me, and I wish it wouldn't, but I didn't know we were talking about this specific part. But I listened to a podcast, and it was a trans man who talked about coming out as a lesbian, okay, only a few years ago, and what that was like, getting married to a woman, and then coming to the realization, and maybe not even the realization, but just really feeling comfortable enough to say, okay, by the way, I'm not actually a lesbian. I am a man. And then going through that transition, and what that has been like for his marriage. And then having to relive, well, this is who you said you were. Okay, but this is who I really am. And so I just thought that was really interesting. And so what I would love to say um, to folks who identify as being straight, male or female, get to know people from the LGBTQ community. That doesn't mean you're going to go and bombard the people in your family or your friend groups. Maybe you can do that if you have that relationship, but there are a ton of resources out there. Build some empathy around trying to better understand what it might be like to be in somebody else's shoes. Like that's where we start, is with empathy. And I just want to put up a couple more comments really quick. This is from Beth Imes. Hi, Beth. She says, I came into the show late, so I'm not sure what "are you using pronouns" means exactly. Okay, we'll talk about it. I do remember Ayana talking about signaling in your social media that you are an ally to put your pronouns, which I haven't done yet, but should do. So can you take that? Do you want to answer, Jeffrey? She's just
Yeah,
asking what we mean by using pronouns.
yeah. Um, Yeah, just so I think, earlier in the conversation, we sort of talked about forming a narrative around pronoun usage and being clear, even if you feel like it's obvious. One of the things that I said earlier is I was slow to adopt pronoun usage because I felt like there wasn't, there wasn't anything to be guessed about. I think I thought wrongly, like, okay, well, I at least always have a 5 o'clock shadow. That's just like who I am. People are going to know who I am, right? But that's
Right.
not necessarily true, because as we touched on earlier in the conversation, like biology does not exist on a binary the same way psychology does not exist on a binary. Our concepts of gender identity, our concepts of sexuality, and frankly, even our concepts of like who we are biologically, they exist on a spectrum, right? We may have more of one hormone than the other. And that may not be like how it is typically distributed in most humans. There's a million different things that it could be, right? And I think that it is important to change the narrative to create an environment where we don't take these things for granted, right? We can say to each other like, "This is who I am," and that sort of eliminates the ambiguity. It alleviates the pressure off of people who may be using a different pronoun, or you may feel uncomfortable sort of telling people what their pronouns are because they feel like they may get backlash, like maybe something about them doesn't, or match. Yeah, other people might think it doesn't like match their pronoun, and they may like get some pushback on that. And that just like from a standpoint of just like having that initial reaction with somebody, it's like, are we prejudging them or are we not? Do we even want to take the time to know who this person is?
Right.
If your answer is no, you're a jerk. Sorry.
Period. Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And that's really all it is. No one, as we talked about earlier in the conversation, no one's going to be mad at you if you make an honest mistake. But if you're a jerk, people are going to be mad at you. Did I answer clearly enough, or did I sort of go off on a tangent?
No, I love the rivers, the valleys, the tangents, the channels. I love all conversation, and I think we cover a multitude of things just in you answering that. I'm going to put up one last comment, and if anyone else has a question, please go ahead and ask it now. Jack is going to cover up our face. His is so long, but I'm down with it. He said, my identity is so complex, but my gender is simply what it appears to be. If someone else has gender as their most sensitive, most important identity, then I respect that. Again, period, right? If we're just open to accepting people whereas they are, that acceptance should be evident. I loved the movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Few among us have the grace, there's that word, to become like Mr. Rogers as depicted in the film. There's a rare grace filled with love for others. And Jeffrey, you and I talked about, we had our own side conversation about how we grapple with faith and all of these things that we're talking about right now. And we talked about just in a nutshell what Jack is saying. Let love be your highest priority. Because if love is your highest priority, then those other things, they get knocked down and they're not as important. And just love people where they are for who they are. I don't want to hear about this. Love the person but not the sin. Shut up. No, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about you putting love first, full stop. Okay. Because I think that's really important. Jeffrey, this was such an important conversation. I'm so glad we're friends. Okay.
Me too. And I know we could go on and on and on. So
that's what we do.
Put a pin on it, but always happy to sort of expand. It's hard to sort of talk about a complex thing, and I come from a place of recognizing that people are going to have questions about this kind of stuff.
Right. So listen, people will have questions, but guess what? The internet is real. The internet is real. Google is real. And I am telling you all that just like I'm passionate about teaching people about diversity and inclusion and why we should better understand one another so that we can build better workplaces and better communities, there are people from the LGBTQ plus community who their life's mission is to help us straight people like me, like some of you, to better understand their community so that we can build empathy and we can be better allies. And those are the kind of people that I want to surround myself with all day, every day, 24/7. So,
and can I just say to that point, queer people and just people who are sort of outside the binary exist everywhere.
Yes.
So we live in an area where people don't necessarily associate it with queer people. We think everybody is very traditional in our neck of the woods. And let me be the first to tell you that it is just not the case. Queer people are everywhere, whether they're sort of out or not.
Yeah.
And coming from a place of wanting to show everyone respect, sort of when I meet them, I want to be mindful of that. And it's not that hard.
And it's not that hard. It's not. Jeff, thank you so much for being here today. You can come back anytime you want. This has been a great conversation. Listen, everybody, thank you so much for watching today. Let me put this up because I always forget to tell you to follow Maximum Communications so that you don't miss boop, boop, boop right there. So that you don't miss my live shows. They're on almost every Sunday on both Facebook Live and LinkedIn Live. One day I'm going to get my YouTube channel together. Hopefully, we'll see. It's garbage right now. It's a work in progress, but you can go and follow me there too. And hey, next week, I am going to be talking to Justine, and Justine is going to come on and talk about the Enneagram. So for those of you who love personality tests, you know, the Briggs-Meyer, all those different kinds of tests, come on. See us at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time next Sunday. Jeffrey, thank you so much.
Thank you. Anytime.
Listen, I can't wait to do lunch, but you know I'm afraid of, no, we got to go somewhere where it's not busy.
Same.
We'll do it soon. Bye, everybody. Have a good week.